Hi folks, so today we're going to be breaking down a track in the style of Flying Lotus and Shigeto. I'm Tom and I make electronic music under the moniker Bamboo Leaves. On this channel we break down signature sounds and electronic genres along with music production tips on Logic Pro X. If that sounds like something you're interested in, consider subscribing to this channel for future tutorials. Alright, let's hop right in. I'll start by playing the introduction. I just want to start by addressing this kind of lead-in section before getting into the main chunk of the track. What I want to show you is just the part where a few of the instruments stop. We have this snare kind of clack and then a reverse cymbal and then that kind of hits into it. So I'll just play that little bit there now. So without going into too much detail yet about the processing on the snares, I just want to play you these three snares that I've layered on top of each other that form that snare clack, just that you hear there. It's like a really reverberant, hard-hitting snare clack. I'll talk about those in more detail in a minute. For this leading in section, I bounced down all of those snares into audio and I reversed them so that we have this kind of reverse snare that's reverberant and it leads into that clack and it gives a nice effect. So in order to achieve that, I soloed these three, I bounced in place, that gave me a snare track. I'll just play that snare track there on its own. I then just went in and reversed it, so you can see that this is now reversed if we listen to it again. Yeah, and then I just positioned that just before the other snares come in, so it has the reverse that leads into the snares. Let me just play that original sound. Also, I have just this crash cymbal. I just reversed it, put it on the track above it, and I added a little bit of an extra fade so that it was a more kind of sloped fade in really quickly. That's why I've added that additional fade into it. Next, we have the main section where it kind of drops. Let's start with a kick. I just dragged a kick into the quick sampler. I faded out the tail of it so that it was a bit tighter, a little bit more snappy. I made sure to choose like a kick that was quite like a little bit distorted, some sub end and a little bit like crunch on the top end. Let me show you the MIDI for that as well while I play it. Nothing additional on the processing for that one. Next, I have this sub kick. So I have a kind of another kick sample that's much more subby. It's kind of got a long sub tail 808 kind of feel. So let's just listen to that. So I've put that in to complement a few of the kicks. So if we play the kick and the kick sub together, it kind of just gives a bit more of a deeper, edgier sound, I think. Now we're on to the snares. We've heard a little bit on the snares already, but I'll just solo those and we can listen to them. So we've got this really clacky, really compressed, really aggressive sounding snare group. In order to do this, I have built that up with three different snares. I have this high rim, low rim, and then just this snare sound. So I'll play the high rim. I've taken out some of the low end on that to give a bit more space down there in the mix. We've got this low rim. Same thing, but it's just a pitch down or just like a lower sounding rim shot. The same thing, we've rolled off the low end. And then I have this other snare sample. Yeah, that's a bit tighter. That sort of fills in some of those mid-range frequencies that I'd be missing from the other two. And altogether, it sounds kind of like this. An additional thing to note on these snares is that I have actually made sure to vary the amount to which these are offset from each other. So you can see here that all the snares don't really line up together on this first hit at least. And it kind of gives like a whipping, clacky sound. But on the next one, we actually have them that they're a bit closer to being more lined up. So it's like... I've made sure to sort of vary the amount of clack that there is and the sort of the difference between the snare sounds. It gives a more human feel, and it gives it like an edgier kind of like hip hop vibe that I'm getting from the sort of the Flying Lotus, Shigeto genres. Right, so an important thing, because I want these really aggressive, hard sounding hip hop drums, what I've done is I've bussed all of these snare sounds into their own snare bus, and I've added additional processing onto that to make them really aggressive sounding. So you can just see over here, I've actually, the output of each of these, I have put to bus 11. Bus 11 is this bus over here. So all of those snare sounds, they all get put into the same bus, and then I put some group processing on all of those. I'll take off all the processing and we can hear it without that kind of that bust compression on top of it. Yeah, and then if I add all that processing back on, so much difference. This is like where you get that full on aggressive in your face smacking snare sound. So to start with, I have a Valhalla vintage verb. It's adding a snare room reverb effect on it. It's important to note here the order in which I've put these bits of processing on. So I'm starting with a reverb because I want to give a roomy sound, and then I want to push that room sound through into a compressor quite aggressively to bring out a lot of that room and a lot of that kind of space. But here's where the big effect happens. I've got this compressor on there, so I'm adding this extra aggression. It's really pushing up the gain. I've got the compression really aggressive. It's doing quite a lot, and it's pushing up that gain, and it's bringing that room snare sound right up and in your face. I've got a bit of reduction on there because I don't want it to be clipping at above 0 decibels. And then lastly, I've rolled off a lot of the low end. Nice one. So let's listen to the kick and the snares playing together a little bit. Just something I'd like to touch upon for this sort of hip hop wavy beats genre kind of thing is to kind of get a groove and to get like a swing and a syncopation to this. You need to shift the snares off the beat so they don't all hit on the actual beats of the bar. And it's like you need to be sure that some of them land on the bar, but some of them are shifted, kind of brought up, and it gives that more expedited feel to the track where it feels like it's kind of rushing a little bit. And then you might push it back off the bar and it will then have a bit more of a relaxed feel, but kind of having that pull and push motion gives that kind of that wavy feel. It kind of gets a nice groove if you can dial it in just right. So the next part I want to focus on is this shaker 1. In context with the rest of the track. Yeah, this is where we start kind of getting much more of that groove. This shake is really bringing in a lot of the feel, a lot of the swing to this beat. The actual sample, I've just dragged in a shaker sound into a sampler. Free cue. I've just rolled off a lot of the low end because I only want the high end on that. And I've also bussed it to another sort of snare room sound reverb so that it kind of sounds like it's in a similar space to the snares. However, the interesting part about this track is the MIDI. So you can see here that the MIDI, it's not happening just every beat of the bar, because effectively it is just a every beat of the bar. However, you can see that these aren't lining up to the beats of the bar very frequently. And also you can see that the velocities are all over the place. I kind of did this to give a bit more of a human feel and add a bit more swing to this groove. To achieve that, you can draw these notes in, you can change the velocity by dragging them up and down. But what I actually have done, I've used this humanize feature in Logic. So I want to replicate what I've got there again. So I'll duplicate the track, I'll add a new MIDI region. I'll just put a note on each of the bar. Okay, so I've just drawn these in. All the velocities are the same and all of the beats are on the same, just on every bar. So if I just play that, you kind of hear how it's a bit more mechanical, a bit more robotic. Let me just select all of the notes, go into the functions, go to MIDI transform and humanize. So in the humanize section, you can kind of change some parameters to see how much sort of aggressive you want the effect to be applied. I had it to 17, I think. So after having all of these selected, and then I just click operate only, you can see that it has shifted these off the bar and all these velocities have gone all over the place. So if I press it a few more times, you can see that it's just like shimmying things around. So let's play it now. Yeah, so like the things are like hitting harder, softer, a little bit off the beat. And that's how I've got that kind of a bit more of the groove into this beat. I think this is something that Flying Lotus and Shigeto and the likes are probably doing in their tracks, or at least they're having some similar kind of effect applied to it. Either that, or they are actually playing in through some drum pads maybe to actually get the real human effect. Next sound we have is another shaker, similar processing applied to this, but let's just listen to it as well. So that one is just panned a bit to the left, and it's a different shaker sound that I've dragged into a sampler, and it kind of complements the existing shaker on the kind of the last beats in the bar. Next, I have this sticks percussion. For that one, I have, again, just pulled a stick perc sound into a sampler. I'm driving it a little bit more with the filter. I'm not bringing the cutoff down or anything like that. I'm fading off the sound so it's a little bit deadened. I've got an EQ where I'm bringing out loads of the low ends because I don't really need those. I've put a tremolo on here for the Logic tremolo. It kind of shifts the sound to the left and the right, so it kind of moves around left and the right. But I've only got the depth to 37%, so it doesn't push it all the way to the left, all the way to the right. It kind of only just goes a little bit in front of you on the stereo field. Okay, on top of that, I've bussed the sound to a rotor cabinet in Logic. It kind of gives a bit more of a wooden clangy feel. I also have bussed it to a reverb as well. So let's play all of those drums together. Right, so that's just really heavy drums. That sounds really aggressive. And similar to how I have treated the snares, where I've bussed them all to a group and I've applied some aggressive compression to it. All of those sounds that you're seeing there that have been soloed, I have also bussed all of those to a bus, which I've called the drum bus. And that drum bus has some more aggressive, it just has some more compression on it to glue them together and bring some of those dynamics squashed and up a little bit. And also I have rolled off some of the top end. I wanted to get rid of some of that glisten, some of that kind of shine. I wanted it to be dead. And I've boosted the kick range and taken out some of the mids. All right, cool. That's all the drums done. So let's move on to some instruments. First we have this bandpass bass. Let's listen to it. You can see I've got the velocities for all of these notes are all over the place again as well. So I think I have applied that humanize feature to these bass sounds as well. For this sound, I use the Logic Retro Synth. It has this growling bass preset that I loaded. I tweaked a few of the parameters, mainly the filter envelope and maybe the filter a little bit on itself. But basically this sound has a bandpass filter enabled that moves according to an LFO on a really slow rate up and down. So it has the bandpass with a really high resonance boost, and it's just sort of pushing that filter, the resonance, across, and it's taking out all of the high and all of the low, and you've just got this mid resonance that's kind of playing, so you can hear that there. There's also a glide on there, so the notes, they don't just play one next to each other, they kind of move into the next one instead of do. So there's a little bit of glide on there as well. I added a tremolo with a full depth of 100% and at a rate of a half T. So basically it moves that sound all the way to the left and all the way to the right. On top of that, I've added a little bit of reverb as well. Next, I have this punch bass. It's playing the same notes as that bandpass bass that I've got before. It's quite punchy, it's quite aggressive, fits in with the Flying Lotus sort of aggressive sound. For this one, I had a preset that was called the Heavy Punch Bass. I brought the filter envelope in from it kind of being out here. So it punches and it hits a bit harder. I added on a compressor to flatten out that sound and a limiter to make sure that it doesn't clip. I've taken off a lot of the high end. It was a bit too kind of crunchy, clicky at the top, so I just took off that top end. I've also included a transient shaper where I wanted to emphasize the attack and the sustain, so I wanted it to kind of hit harder when it plays, and I also wanted to drag out the end sound of the envelope. There's a bit of a difference there. I have also bussed this synth sound to the rotor cabinet, so I wanted to give a little bit more of the wooden feel to it as well. Those two bass synths are playing the same notes. They complement each other, and I kind of layered them up to give this sound. Next, I have this glittery synth sound. To achieve this, I have used an ESP, stock Logic synth, and an arpeggiator, that is the Logic arpeggiator. Without the arpeggiator, you get these notes. So it's just sort of like a plucky sound. You can see what I've done in terms of looking at the synth parameters there. I just had a kind of constantly sustained notes here. Now if I enable the arpeggiator, yeah, so that's just taking that kind of chord that's played. I've got it on a 32 triplet. I've got the octave range up to 3, so that's why it's kind of going really higher up and it's not just those 4 notes. Without any of the other processing on it, sounds like this. There is a bit of reverb that's applied to that sound just there. I've added on a compressor to make the sound more aggressive again, bring up those dynamics and squash it in a little bit. I've added a bit of a bandpass EQ on there, taken off those really high ends. I've put a distortion on there to make it crunchier. Not much difference, but there is some. I've got a tape delay as well. So this tape delay, I'm applying some just normal delay with a 1/4 triplet, but I'm also making use of the modulation parameters here to kind of add some flutter and wow tape effects to the delayed signal as well. I've got a video on where I kind of go through the tape delay a bit more in reference to lo-fi piano, so you can watch that. Let's listen to how it sounds without it and then with it. Now with it. You might be able to hear the pitch shifting of the delayed signal a little bit. It kind of gives it a bit more wobble. And then finally, I've got a tremolo where I'm shifting the signal to the left and to the right on 1/16 notes. So that actually keeps the signal quite wide and it doesn't really come down the middle. So it kind of gives a bit more space in the mix. So I've also put some sidechain compression onto this glittery synth sound. I'm going to be making a video where I outline LFO tool and sidechain effects and how to do it properly with Logic Pro X in an upcoming video at some point. The basics is I route the signal to bus 5, and then on a separate track that I've got here, I then take the LFO tool as an instrument. I then have a sidechain of bus 5, so all the signal that's been pushed to bus 5, I'm then kind of bringing into the sort of the signal chain on this LFO tool. I have this note re-trigger when there's a note played on this, so I've actually just copied the kick MIDI notes, so these all play at the same time as the kicks, and it will trigger off this envelope here. So that gives that ducky feel, and when the kick hits, it kind of gives a more impactful kick because those sort of reverberant delayed sounds are kind of ducking and giving space for the kick. Next instrument we have on this section is this sustained string, so let's listen to that now. This is also sidechained so you'll be able to hear that effect. So this is just some string sample that I got from the Logic loops. It's just a continuous note. I cut it down. I think there might have been something either side of this, but it was just a continuous note. Got a bandpass filter on that to take out the lows and the highs, and I'm moving it across the stereo field with a tremolo effect. I put that in to give a bit of a bed to the sound, so it's not very audible on its own. You would really notice it unless it was missing. So actually, if I play everything and then I remove it, you might be able to hear kind of why it's in there. It's gone now. So you could argue it's better with it or without it. I just thought it gave it a bit more atmosphere to the track. And again, like the glittery synth from before, I have bussed it to bus 5, which is the sidechain bus, and those sidechain effects are being applied to it. On the last sort of third of the track here, the only difference is I have added in an extra violin sample instrument, and I did a little bit of like a stop-start effect on the introduction of this bar. So it's like I stopped playing the kicks and some of the bass sounds, and it sort of like stops, hits the snare and carries on. Yeah, that's something like in the hip hop genres that you kind of take some things out at the end of a bar or at the start of a bar to kind of keep the listener interested, and then you bring it back in. The only other thing, like I say, I've added is this sample of a violin. Again, I got this from the Logic loops. It's just some sort of violin sample. I've kind of brought in the sample start to a place where I thought it sounded good. The things I've done on this instrument, I've enabled the filter, and I have got this cutoff that's automated by an LFO. So I have this LFO 1. Every 4 bars it has a cycle. I'm saying it's via LFO 1. I'm targeting the filter cutoff, which is this, and I've got this sort of spread. You can see the orange bar is moving up on the filter, and that's kind of where we're getting this like sound from. Just for that violin sample, I've got the tremolo, moving it in the stereo field, and I've also got it bussed to the rotor cabinet, along with a bandpass filter for the EQ. This blend of electronic sounds, sort of hip-hoppy kind of violin samples with aggressive, pumping, hard-hitting drums, kind of gives me that Flying Lotus vibe. So let's play this last bit. That's the end of this video. Thank you for sticking it out to the end. If you've got any questions about any of the stuff I've covered in that, put it in the comments and I'll get back to you. If you've got any you want me to explain anything extra, I'll reply to your comments. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like for the YouTube algorithm and subscribe to this channel, and you'll get future videos when I post them. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.